Okay, so Happy New Year to everyone. And the start of the year always means a CES, right? The Consumer Electronics Show. So NVIDIA just dropped 13 open models at their CES 2026 event. And one of these I think is going to be really useful for building voice AI apps. So while everyone's talking about the price of NVIDIA stock and if it's going to crash or not, I want to go through what they've released, what they talked about, and by the end of the video, you'll understand what NVIDIA just open sourced, why it matters, and how this particular speech model can accelerate a whole bunch of agents in 2026. So let's dive in. Okay, so starting off, one of the sort of amazing things about this, don't forget, this is the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas. And this is where normally NVIDIA would announce their sort of consumer products. And in the past, that's literally meant their gaming cards. And yet in the keynote that Jensen gave and the announcements that they've had around it, we haven't had a single GPU launch. And this is the first time that's happened in sort of 5 years. So it's kind of amazing that at this consumer electronics show, NVIDIA basically chose to focus on things that were for developers and things that were for data centers and hyperscalers. And that brings me to the first thing that everyone's talking about. And this is the Vera Rubin platform, or this sort of next-gen AI supercomputer. So this certainly looks to be really interesting, not only from the perspective of hyperscalers buying these pods to train large models, but also through the fact that NVIDIA seems to be focusing now also a lot more on inference. And part of this system is really focused on getting the inference costs down a lot. And you can certainly imagine that this is something that OpenAI, Microsoft, a lot of the hyperscalers out there have been asking for. As they're seeing the AI is taking off, they're realizing that really they need to be able to reduce those inference costs to be able to increase their margins. Also, this system they're touting to be much better for training mixture of experts models compared to the Blackwell chips that we've already had out there. So undoubtedly, Wall Street is probably going to focus on this announcement the most. And along with announcing the chips that are coming out in the second half of the year this year, they announced that these chips are going to be used by AWS, by Google, by Microsoft, by Oracle. And in fact, I found it interesting, the quotes that they had from everyone from Sam Altman to Dario Amodei to Mark Zuckerberg to Elon Musk to Satya Nadella. All these people were happy to lend quotes to NVIDIA for these chips because they want to get their hands on them because they know there's going to be a backlog of people wanting these. But while the Vera Rubin platform was the key element of the hardware, with it being 5 times faster than the Blackwell chips for data centers, for me, the real interesting thing here is this whole sort of software element. And in particular, the 13 models that they announced and just how varied they actually are. So first off, we've got the autonomous vehicle models. And this is Alpamayo, the first open reasoning model for self-driving cars. So this is a 10B model. And the whole idea is this combined with AlpaSim, which is the simulation framework and models around that, are models that seem to be being trained on the whole idea of just input being vision and output being calling some kind of API system in a car, etc. And they even talked about Mercedes is going to be launching a car with this early this year. For me, the interesting thing here is that this idea of getting chain of thought reasoning for sort of these rare scenarios, and also the fact that they're getting a model that small to be able to do some of these things, obviously with a latency speed that is actually going to work for driving a car. Next up, they had some updates to their Cosmos models. So this is all about physical AI and robotics. And these are also interesting from the point of view of being sort of world models, with the Cosmos Transfer and Cosmos Predict models being used to generate synthetic training videos for different kinds of real-world tasks for robots, etc. Building on the robotics theme, they had Isaac GRU, which is a humanoid sort of robot model, and then followed closely by their Clara models, which are 4 health and drug discovery models in here. And while all of those models are really interesting, they're pretty niche case uses. The ones that I think is going to be the most interesting out of this are the Nemotron Agentic AI models. And the key thing with these models is really they're pushing things in a sort of multimodal direction. So we've got a RAG embedding model, but this is not just for text. This is for vision and full sort of multimodal document embeddings. They've also put out a Nemotron RAG re-ranker, again for the sort of multimodal use. And then the model that I think is most interesting is this Nemotron Speech ASR. And this seems to be really building on the whole sort of parakeet models that we've seen come out of NVIDIA, which I've got to say at the moment are my favorite ASR models. They've replaced any sort of use of Whisper, anything where I was using Whisper in the past and stuff like that. And there's so many different versions of them that you can actually embed these really easily into things like Mac apps, phone apps. And this new model, the Nemotron Speech Streaming app, seems to be the same size as the previous Parakeet model, but now they've definitely designed this for low latency, real-time applications. So you can imagine things like live captioning, voice agents, meeting transcriptions, even things like in-car assistance or at-the-edge assistance, that kind of thing. So the models are already up on Hugging Face. You can see, if we come in here, we can see the Cosmos 2 models, and specifically the Nemotron speech models up there. And going in here, you can see a little bit about the model. They've got a paper out about how it works. And here's the actual dev blog that goes through and explains a little bit about how this actually works and how they've actually managed to make this so much faster. This is actually very interesting to look at, that most streaming models in the past use some kind of overlapping system. And that means that you're often computing the same frames of audio multiple times. The interesting thing with this model is that it actually maintains a cache, so it knows what it's computed and what it hasn't computed. So it doesn't actually waste compute redoing the same audio multiple times. So they've also got a Hugging Face space up that you can actually come in here and try out. You can pick the different latency models that you want in here. And then you can see that we can just turn this on, and reasonably quickly, I think it might take a bit of a second to go at the start, but you can see that we're getting in a sort of streaming of what I'm talking about. I noticed that this is actually running quite a bit slower at times, and I'm not sure that this is actually a great example of the speed that it can do. But you can see here that it's tracking along maybe a bit slowly, and at least we're getting some kind of live streaming output in here. Another thing that's interesting in here is we're already seeing things like MLX versions and lower bitrate versions. And one of the really good things about having the MLX versions is that you can run it fully locally. So here, this may look like a Hugging Face space, but it's actually just a Gradio interface where it's running fully locally on my Mac here. And this is an older version of Parakeet. This is the V3, the more recent one. But you can see I've got an 18-second clip in there. If I click transcribe, you can see it's already transcribed it, and it's doing it in a much faster than real-time way for something that's basically just running locally on my machine. This is the model that I'm using in a number of different apps for doing transcription of things, and you can even combine it with some of their other models to do things like diarization, etc. So overall, just to finish up, the NVIDIA announcement probably really wasn't a mainstream consumer thing. It's a bit out of place at the Consumer Electronics Show, but really had some interesting things, both from a hardware perspective, but also from a software and model perspective. So if you are looking for a model to do sort of transcription, etc., you can either use the Parakeet model, which is roughly the same size as the new model that they've released, or this current model for any sort of voice app stuff that you're doing where you want to keep it fully local and not have to basically be paying for sometimes what can be quite expensive calls to one of the hyperscalers just for doing something like ASR. Anyway, as always, let me know what you thought in the comments, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye for now.